Psalm 31. Psalm 31, Psalm of David, where he cries out that the Lord is my rock and He is my fortress. One of the great things about the Lord that He accomplished in David's life and that He's faithful to accomplish in our lives is to give us those, these things that we can say. It's easy to say, the Lord is my rock and He's my refuge. It's easy to sing and all those kinds of things. And Kit was talking about, growing a little older in the Lord and all a little bit tonight. And one of the beauties is that the Lord takes and reveals the reality of those things. And how are we going to know He's our rock and He's our refuge unless, He puts us in some deep water, puts us into some difficult situations where we've got to depend on Him to be our rock and flee to Him as our refuge and discover Him to be everything that He promised to be. And that's the blessing. Early on you think that it's just going to be in memorizing all of these verses. And then the Lord says, well, that's great, that's excellent, I want you to do that, but they represent a reality that I'm going to walk you into and walk with you through. David, when he writes Psalm 31, is in a very deep trial, very difficult trial. The trial is so deep that you go back to the historical books and you try and figure out when was he in his hardest time in order to identify what was the circumstance of it. And there were two times that were probably the most difficult as it relates to David's life, and one occurred early in his life and one occurred late in his life. Early in his life when he was called and anointed to be the king of Israel, and yet for all those years he was forced to flee Saul. And in all of it, God was preparing David to become the king, but He didn't want another king like David or like Saul. And so what did He do? He put a Saul in David's life to remove the Saul out of David's life. And so often when we're in those circumstances, we think it's the end of the world, but God is doing something good. And I think that David, for the rest of his life, whenever he began to be like Saul in any way, just be quick right there by the Spirit. Ooh, I don't want to. And the Lord really works that way. It was a tough time. But God knew the fullness of what He was calling David to, and the kind of foundation that would be needed to be built into his life to withstand what it was going to be the king of Israel. And God is always faithful to build a sufficient foundation in our life for what He's going to build on it. The foundation comes first. The other time in David's life occurred late in his life, when his son Absalom turned on him. There were a lot of difficult times in David's life. That had to be one of the most difficult because it just came out of the blue in his mind. Here, Absalom, you just don't think your son is going to turn on you. Especially after David had shown him so much grace. Absalom had, killed the one brother and had gone off into exile, and then David allowed him back in, and Joab had a part in all of that. He came back in, and we're going to get to the psalm in a minute, but he came back in and allowed him back into the place, and Absalom began to work behind David's back, and then until he, gathered all of the men of renown, and then he led his rebellion against David. And David goes in 1 hour, in 1 hour's time, he goes from, in his mind, thinking, I'm going to spend the rest of my, born days being the king of Israel. I'm set. I've got the power. I've got the riches. I've got everything. This is the way my life is going to be until I die and go to be with the Lord. No idea that this was coming. And in an hour, he's gathering together his wives and he's gathering together the valiant men that were with him from the beginning, and he flees the city of Jerusalem and he goes over the brook Kidron and he begins to head out into the wilderness, running for his life from his son. And so hard. I'll tell you something about David. And one of the lessons that we learn, and I personally think it was that chapter that this psalm comes out of, the Absalom incident. And I'll tell you why when we get to it in the psalm. But it was sure a good thing that David stayed current with the Lord. When things were easy and when they were smooth, he continued to grow in the Lord. It's a tough thing to be driven out of Jerusalem and out into the wilderness, and then all of a sudden you're saying, now where did I put my relationship with the Lord? With David, instantly, even when Shimei came out and began to curse him, and David's, valiant men said, let me take his head off. What's he doing? Cursing the king like that and all. And David, every word that came out of his mouth was in the context of that relationship with God. Who knows what the Lord is doing? Don't do that. Who knows? Maybe the Lord sent him, and all of that. And it really teaches me, this psalm really teaches me. It teaches me that everything can change in 1 second in life. And we need to have that relationship with Him current. Everything can be pulled out from under us in life in 24 hours, in 1 hour. And so often those quiet times where we think, well, I'm just right out my years, and all that, and that time gets wasted. And we don't know what's going to come. And so David's so wise, staying close to the Lord. And so he begins the psalm by saying, in you, O Lord, I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in your righteousness. Bow down your ear to me. Deliver me speedily. Be my rock of refuge. Let me be the one that I can hide in you, Lord. A fortress of defense to save me. For you are my rock and my fortress. And again, he knows it, because whatever he's in, he's discovered the Lord to be these things in his life. God was true to His word. Therefore, for your name's sake, lead me and guide me. Pull me out of the net which they have secretly laid for me. For you are my strength. And into your hand I commit my spirit. Now that's a phrase that we see a couple of times in the New Testament. The same Spirit on David here, we see later on Stephen, that first martyr in the church. You remember as he was being stoned and he cried out, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And then it was the very words and the very heart of Jesus as He was on that cross and He cried out. He said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. David said, into your hand I commit my spirit. You have redeemed me, O Lord God of truth. I have hated those who regard vain idols, but I trust in the Lord. I'll be glad and rejoice in your mercy, for you have considered my trouble. You have known my soul in adversities, and have not shut me up into the hand of the enemy. You have set my feet on a wide place, that is, on a safe place. And now he describes the depths of the trial that he's in. Have mercy on me, O Lord. Now, we kind of read it through and we say, okay, yeah, have mercy on me, O Lord. But I mean, when you're in that place, and that's the expression of the deepest part of your heart, that's what, have mercy on me, Lord. I am dead if you don't. That's where he's at. That's a level of the trial. I mean, he's leaning his whole weight on the Lord in this trial. He said, have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. My eye wastes away with grief. Yes, my soul in my body, for my life is spent with grief, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my iniquity. And this is one of the reasons I think it goes back to Absalom, because all of that rebellion in the house, Nathan the prophet had said it would come out of that adultery that David had with Bathsheba. And so he looks at it maybe and he recognizes that it's, a part of his sin and that's, affected the house. And my bones waste away. I'm a reproach among all of my enemies. Well, we expect that, but here's the hard part. He said, but especially among my neighbors, the ones that are close to us, when they turn in a time like that. And I am repulsive to my acquaintances. Those who see me outside flee from me. I'm forgotten like a dead man, out of mind. I'm like a broken vessel. And so there you have, an interesting picture, I think, really concerning the Lord. When we were over in Israel recently, and you go to Mount Calvary, where Jesus, the most precious thing that the world has ever had fall, ever touch it, it's that blood that fell from Jesus onto that cross and then to that ground. You go there today in the Arab bus station in front, and of course they put the cemetery up on top to defile it and everything. And beautiful British ministry has taken over the Garden Tomb area. It's the most peaceful place in all Jerusalem. But you go to Jerusalem today and you look at it, and I'll tell you, Jesus could say those things. I'm forgotten like a dead man out of sight. I mean, he's just so difficult to find in that city. He said, I'm like a broken vessel. For I hear the slander of many. Fear is on every side. While they take counsel together against me, they scheme to take away my life. But as for me, I trust in you. And so this second cry of confidence in the Lord, and a cry to the Lord for deliverance. I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies. I really like that in verse 15. My times are in your hands. That's a great piece, isn't it? To be a Christian just on that front, to walk through life and say, Lord, as I walk with you, my time is in your hand. I'll leave this world and I'll finish my ministry when you say, no matter how many enemies rise up against and all, they're not going to cut my ministry short one moment as I'm serving the beautiful peace. And we need that in these trials. To know, Lord, my times are in your hands. They're not in anybody else's hands. They're in your hands. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies and from those who persecute me. Make your face shine upon your servant. Save me for your mercy's sake. And do not let me be ashamed, O Lord, for I have called upon you. Let the wicked be ashamed. Let them be silent in the grave. Let the lying lips be put to silence which speak insolent things proudly and contemptuously against the righteous. Oh, how great is your goodness, which you have laid up for those who fear you, those who have prepared, which you have prepared for those who trust in you, in the presence of the sons of men. You shall hide them in the secret place of your presence from the plots of man, and you shall keep them secretly in a pavilion from the strife of tongues. And so here is David, and again it seems to me to indicate a man who is, further along in his life, and his mind begins to reflect upon the faithfulness of God to him in the past. And as he thinks about that, it begins to really anchor him, in the confidence that the Lord will be faithful now in this trial. And that's a great thing. The reflection that we experience as Christians, not to look back at our sin or look back in, condemnation or those things, but to look back and see the grace of the Lord and the faithfulness of the Lord and how that builds up our faith for the things that we face today. And that's what was going on with David. He said, blessed, verse 21, be the Lord, for he has shown me his marvelous kindness in a strong city. For I said in my haste, I'm cut off from before your eyes. In other words, David said, I'm a dead duck. And he said the wrong thing. It wasn't right, but he admits it. Lord, I thought I wasn't, and again, he's not the hero of his own psalm. His faith kind of slipped, but he admits it. I said in my haste, I'm cut off from before your eyes. Nevertheless, you heard the voice of my supplications when I cried out to you. And then this beautiful heart of David, this shepherd's heart, he's going through this deep trial. And now as he's just kind of talking it over with the Lord, his faith builds. Now, you see, remember that's like one of the characteristics of the psalm. And that's a great thing to do. We got all of these canals that run all over the place and walking past. It's a great thing in that kind of a trial just to take a walk and just begin to talk it over with the Lord. It's amazing how he talks back. Not in an audible voice, but the verses that he brings to remembrance, or the things that you start to remember about this and about that, and then pretty soon you're praising the Lord, and I mean everything gets turned around in your own heart. And so just that time with the Lord, everything gets turned around, and that's what's happened to him. And not only has it affected his faith and his confidence in the trial, but now he's got a torrent of living water coming out of him, so to speak, where he wants to encourage everyone around him. So now he turns to the saints and he says to them, "Oh, love the Lord, all you His saints. For the Lord preserves the faithful and fully repays the proud person. Be of good courage, and He shall strengthen your heart, all you who hope in the Lord." And so here his confidence just spills over now into the other lives. Beautiful shepherd's heart. David's saying to the people, "I'm in a tough trial, but my God isn't done with this trial. Don't you be stumbled over the depth of the trial that I'm in and the difficulty that I'm in. It's going to work out." Sometimes you can find yourself in those kinds of trials, don't you? You just look and they are deep. And David said, "I don't want anyone stumbling over the hard place that God has allowed me to be in right now, because I know what He's going to do. Don't be stumbled." So He encourages the saints as it relates to those things. You keep trusting in Him. Psalm 32 is the song of the forgiven. David writes it. It's a contemplation. It's something to